Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're so pleased you decided to join us today for an IEEE webinar session on the topic of empowering technical leaders, strategies to lead and inspire your team. We're very pleased you've taken time to join us today. My name is Jennifer McLean. I'm a Senior Manager of Education Products with IEEE's Educational Activities Department, and I will be moderating today's event. IEEE is the world's largest technical professional organization dedicated to advancing technology for the benefit of humanity. Please note a few housekeeping items before we get started. At the bottom of your screen are engagement tools that are resizable and movable, so you can move them around to make the most out of your dashboard space. We encourage questions for today's presenters, and you can submit them through the Q&A widget on your screen or click the purple Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen, and we'll answer as many questions as time allows. If you click the green resources icon at the bottom of your screen, you'll find more information about IEEE Leading Technical Teams program, which we'll talk about a little bit later, our IEEE e-learning courses, the presentation slides from our session today, and more. We also ask that you please complete our attendee survey form using the survey tool before you leave. We would really appreciate the feedback. The on-demand link for today's webinar will be emailed to all registrants approximately 2 hours after we finish. And if you'd like to tweet about this event, please use the hashtag IEEELearn. Here's our agenda for today. We'll begin with introductions to our speakers, and then we'll move on to the topics of the key aspects of leadership and then the value of feedback. There are opportunities to submit questions throughout the session, but we'll spend some time on Q&A after the presentations. And finally, the session and discussion you're here for today is part of a larger program we're offering called IEEE Leading Technical Teams. And throughout the talk, you'll hear a few references to this program. And if you're interested in learning more about it and can stay until the end, I'll provide you with a few more details. You can also find more information about this program and others, including how to register for an upcoming session in the resources section. Our presenters today are Ron Hadley and Dr. Jason Hui. Ron has conducted leadership development programs with a global focus for over 15 years and has worked for organizations including Wyeth, Novartis, BASF, and IEEE. He holds an MA in HR management. Dr. Jason Hui is Senior Manager of Engineering for Strategic Systems at Textron Systems. He has over 20 years of professional experience in the aerospace and defense industry as a systems engineer, a systems engineering manager, and program engineering manager. Jason received the BS and MS degrees in electrical engineering and the PhD degree in mechanical engineering, all from UCLA. He also received the MS degree in systems engineering from Johns Hopkins University. Jason is a senior member of the IEEE with a long history of diverse IEEE volunteer service. Welcome, Ron and Jason. I will now turn it over to Ron to get us started. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to our IEEE webinar on leadership. As Jennifer mentioned, today we're going to talk about key aspects of leadership with specific focus on leading technical functions. Before we get started, let's find out a little bit about everyone who's attending today. You can see on the screen there's a poll. If you wouldn't mind just clicking on that, and we will take just 30 seconds for you to complete this. Okay, great. Well, that's good to know. I think it's almost good evening for most of the people here. I see we have a large contingent from Europe, followed by the US and Asia. So welcome everyone from Europe. And we've got one more poll, if you wouldn't mind completing what describes your best role in your organization. Okay. So we've got senior directors and executive level. That's good to know. Thank you very much. All right, so let's move on. Okay, well, can we go back one slide? I think the data didn't populate. There we go. There's the accurate information. So we've got no one from HR. Okay, no one from my function, but a lot of leaders across your organization. It's good to know. Thank you very much. Okay, so as we begin talking about leadership, let's think about what creates a great leader. And since we have a lot of people online today, let's use the chat function and very briefly answer two questions. The first question is, think of the best leader you've worked for. What skills and behaviors made them so good? And we're really just looking for characteristics. We'll get to the second question in just a second. Let's focus on the first one. What were the skills and behaviors associated with the best people you worked for? So if you want to just throw it in the chat function, if you have any questions about that, you can, okay. Okay, so we're starting to get some answers come in. Good listener, good direction, support, the human touch, listened and collaborated with the team members valued and helped to grow. We've got a question, where is the chat? If somebody wants to respond to that. Empathy, integrity. Great. Worst dictated and ignored staff. Okay, let's come back to that in a minute. So with the first question, I think we've seen some consistency. People requested that the responses are still coming in. Inspiring, cool, collected, and other responses that we hear frequently as we do this is trustworthy communication, challenge and focus on developing people, skill building, walk the talk, and taking a personal interest in me. One thing that we never see, I don't think I've ever seen this, and that is they were the easiest person I worked for. We don't need to be easy, we need to care. So let's go to the second question. Think about the worst leader you worked for, and what were the issues? Why do you call them the worst leader you worked for? Only interested in results, toxic workplace, selfish, micromanager, dictatorial, which is the same as, well, which is similar to micromanager, degrading to team members. Okay. Power, micromanaged. We see that a lot. Great. So what you're saying, selfishness, bad listener, self-centered, these are the responses that we frequently see. Lack of trust, micromanagement, lack of communication, withholding information, taking credit for others. A lot of responses still coming in here, but I think we get the gist of this. Let's go to our next slide. And I've got one more question for chat. So we now have a picture of perceptions of great leaders. There's many differences in managing a technical function. So what we saw was, general management. As we think about technical professionals and leading technical professionals, next question for chat: what's different about a technical professional from, for instance, logistics or marketing or any of the other functions? Coming out of the pharma industry, I would acknowledge that there's similarities between tech professionals and R&D. And as a matter of fact, I worked in R&D at both Wyeth and Novartis. So in any case, okay. So we have some answers coming in. You have to know things. It's not enough to be a good people person. Really, really good response there. What else is different about technology professionals? How are they differentiated from others? They want to be the most knowledgeable. Okay. Other thoughts? This is a tougher question. Any other thoughts? Well, let me give you some things. We've done our research on this, and of course at IEEE. Okay, here we need to be able to enable the team to work together. Very black and white. There's no differences. Less soft skills, tend to want to bigger challenges. So let's go to some of the things that we've done our research, both in terms of literature, and we've also interviewed a lot of technology professionals and asked this question. So here's some of the things we've come up with. They want access to the latest technology. Of course, they don't want their career to die because they're not keeping up. They prefer to communicate through technology rather than face-to-face. Interesting thing about that, Gen Z, it seems that all Gen Z is preferring technology, so we're gravitating in that direction, but technology is also, I think, leading the way. They're most likely to have an analytical personality type, a disc profile of conscientious or analytical. They are most likely to be impacted by work-life balance issues due to resolving technical issues around the clock and weekends. I see that firsthand. My wife is a technical leader, and she's doing system migrations and upgrades frequently on weekends, and it impacts our schedule. They are detail-oriented and may miss the big picture. They're focused on a small element, and they may miss the big picture. They love technical challenges. Again, I see that in my wife. She loves to be challenged technically. And finally, they must always be learning new technologies to stay current. That's similar to the first one, but so those are some differences with technology professionals. The next slide, I'm going to, rather than use the chat function, just run through what the influences are for a team leader leading a technical function. So the first one, and again, we've done our research, we've researched the literature, we've talked to people, their desire to continue doing the technical work. Technical leaders, technical individual contributors, when they're promoted to leaders, don't want to lose their technical skills. And as a matter of fact, they're quite concerned about that. There's an increased likelihood of micromanagement and staying in the weeds. That's similar to number one, but there's two reasons for it. Number one, they don't want to lose their technical skills. Number two, they really like the challenges and staying in the weeds, and they don't gravitate to the broader picture. Number three, talent retention. Recruitment is an issue, and I think we've all seen that in spades during the past couple of years. I mean, we at IEEE have had a very hard time recruiting technical talent. Workload, we've already talked about that. Managers have to manage workloads of their staff, keeping up with skill gaps as new technology comes out, lack of career development. We have frustration from IT folks who just, they've been in the same role and they want to keep growing, and there may be less room for growth. Budget and resources, and finally, communication. Now, communication may be related to that issue of being the disc profile of a C. They're more comfortable with technology communication. Okay, so let's move on. Before I jump into the leadership model that I'd like to share with you, I'd like to just debrief this chart. As a person that teaches leadership, in my opinion, this is a very important chart, and it's multifaceted. So let's talk briefly regarding the differences between management skills and leadership skills. Both skills are needed, but there's a tendency to gravitate to managerial skills and behaviors. Okay, why? Managers focus on policy. They're always checking on what is. Current status, what needs to be done today? My wife's stand-up meetings, 15 minutes every morning. I think it's a fairly common practice. What's going on today? What happened yesterday? They use authority to assure things are moving forward. They control the process and instruct people on what to do. And finally, they set goals and manage goals. So on the leadership side, leadership practices in many ways are the inverse of managerial skills. Leaders set vision and talk about the future, what could be. They encourage their teams. They use influence skills. They build trust through transparency and honesty. They create a safe and work environment. They challenge the team to find better ways and focus on development so that the team is challenged and can innovate. And finally, they take time to recognize and celebrate successes. Okay, so that's the description of the two sets of skills. Very different set of skills. Here's the interesting things. Before we move forward, hold on for a second. You can't survive as a manager if you don't manage your function. You need to keep on top of unit performance. You need to control your budget. However, you can survive in your role if you don't lead. Since there's limited time each day, managers tend to gravitate to the managerial skill set. Both sets are needed, but we need to allocate time to lead. If you don't, it falls by the wayside. I see this. I was in a program just a couple of months ago, and the senior leader told me, I don't have time to lead. I just don't have time for it. And in fact, for those in technical functions, it may be those softer skills that don't come as natural. Another important point, with manager skills, you can hire and should hire to your weaknesses. If you're light on financial capability, hire someone to bring the skills into your team. Leadership is different. You can't hire for your missing leadership skills. You need to be the person delivering inspiration. You can't delegate collaboration. You can't delegate recognition. It needs to be a full set of skills. Another thing to know, your team listens to your every word. It took me a while to learn this, actually. Every action or commitment drives the culture of your organization. If you take time to lead, your team is going to be more cohesive, more engaged, more willing to go the extra mile. What you do and say really matters. It's also those people who take time to lead who are perceived to have the potential to grow to the next level. So I hope I'm making a case. You need to take time, especially, delegate the technical work, take time for leadership. So now we've been through that. Let's transition to the model that we use in leading technical teams. So I have a good friend from my prior work in the pharma industry who is a technical leader. And I stay in touch with the guy. He's a good friend. He's amazing. He has 20 plus patents. He's usually the smartest person in the room, but he's maxed out on his career. He's stalled and he's frustrated. And I've chatted with him about this. I see two issues. One, he's a micromanager, which prohibits his team from developing. He wants everything done in a particular way, and he doesn't trust the team, and his team is frustrated with him. That's number one. Number two, he's unwilling to accept feedback on his leadership capabilities. He only complains that he's no longer being promoted. He doesn't take ownership of the issue. And we're going to hear from Jason in just a few minutes about feedback. But let's take a look at his issues in terms of the LPI model. Recall we said that you need to take time to lead. To be an effective leader, you need to develop effectiveness in all 5 practice areas. As mentioned in the previous slide, you can hire for your management weaknesses, but you can't hire to replace these skills. So you need to be strong in all 5. So let's take a look at this model in more depth. So there's a lot of words on this slide, but let's just look at each one individually very briefly. First of all, model the way. What values have you established as a basis for how you operate and how you expect your team to operate? So let me give you an example. There's a couple of values, there's a variety of values that I use as I lead my team in HR. One of our roles, what are the values that I live by? One is to assure justice. Now that might sound funny, but I want to ensure that employees are treated fairly, but when necessary, we deliver the other side of justice when dealing with behavioral or performance issues. In some cases, 0 tolerance for various issues, so justice, but I also set the standard to be compassionate. We need to show concern for employees and let them know how much we care, how much IEEE cares for them. So, there's many more values in terms of modeling the way. But how do I communicate this? I tell stories from my past to bring these values to life. Most important, I have to live these values. They have to see it in my behaviors. So model the way. Next one, inspire a shared vision. It's your CEO's role to establish vision for the organization. What do you need to do with your team, though? You need to set the vision for your team. What's the big picture of where your team is going? What's the big picture for how you want them to function? And maybe you've heard the term BHAG, B-H-A-G. Do you have any big, hairy, audacious goals, which is setting the vision for where you want them to go? So have you set a vision? Does your team know the vision? Next one. For challenging the process, are you changing anything? Leaders need to be driving an agenda. Nothing can stay the same in today's world. And if you're not moving forward, you're falling behind. Are you taking risks? Are you making improvements? Okay, enable others to act. This one is multifaceted. You need to drive collaboration across the team. You need to assure all are developing skills, all are challenged. And very importantly, you need to make sure you're not micromanaging. You may want to reflect on this one. Do you find yourself saying, I'm not a micromanager? And I kind of joke around this one, but this is a statement I hear, and I hear primarily from our micromanagers. I can tell, being in HR, they don't see it in themselves. Finally, when's the last time, with regards to encourage the heart, when's the last time you brought bagels to the office to celebrate an accomplishment? When did you call out someone in your staff for an accomplishment? So all are important, but I'd like to focus on just 2 right now. So why do I focus on these 2? The reason I say these two may be, or why do we focus on them? Why might they be more important? Is that these are the most frequently referenced in the best and worst leader exercise. I use that exercise from time to time. It's always these two categories that people fall into. So I have a brief example of how these skills were delivered in a leadership scenario. You may be familiar with the name Alan Mulally, an amazing guy. So prior to joining Ford, he led the technical development of the Boeing 777, so the 777 at Boeing. And he was then promoted to handle the entire 787 development and launch. He's a tech guy, but he's got great leadership skills. So in 2006, Ford tapped him on the shoulder to be their CEO. They were losing $12 billion a year. Stock was trading around $1. So the story behind this, Bill Ford, Henry's grandson, was CEO and was at a loss to know how to fix Ford. They knew they were tanking, and he went to the board and told them that he needed to be replaced. That in itself is actually pretty impressive. The search for his replacement ended up with Alan Mulally. So he implemented an amazing turnaround at Ford, which is considered to be one of the greatest business turnarounds in U.S. history. So we have this guy that came out of technology who saved Ford Motor. The question is, how did an outsider make such dramatic changes throughout the entire Ford organization? And the short answer is he focused heavily on model the way and enable others to act. And, of course, he did much more, but by his own admission, these were the principles that account for the turnaround. His principles: people first, teamwork, listen to people who actually do the work, honesty, transparency, accountability, and leader as facilitator, not leader as boss. And if you look at the commonality, those fall into the leadership side of the agenda as opposed to the manager side of the agenda. In using the model the way competency, he implemented zero tolerance for poor behaviors on his team. He actually let go of half of his executive team within the first 6 months. For enable others to act, he implemented a facilitator approach rather than a boss approach. This was a 180-degree change for the executive committee. If we go to the next slide. So, I don't want to prolong the story. It's actually a much longer story than what I'm sharing here, but his team worked in silos. His CFO had no confidence that the team could even survive. There was backstabbing and throwing each other under the bus. And as I mentioned, he ended up terminating half of the staff. He set the standard to facilitate rather than boss. Don't make suggestions or add value without deep expertise. And he's been quoted extensively, again, similar to what I was just sharing with you. Include everyone. That means employees and stakeholders. Focus on vision. There's that vision word. Strategy and implementation. Everyone needs to know what the vision is and how we're going to get there. Have a positive find a way attitude. And then here we are with model the way. Respect, listen, help, appreciate, create a culture that respects everyone's contributions. So that's just a quick overview of the Mulally story. The book, American Icon, I can recommend it. It's one of the few business books I've read that actually reads like a thriller. And it demonstrates the real-life implementation of the LPI model. So as I draw to a close my presentation on leadership, we talked about the differences between leadership and management. We highlighted the LPI model. And I hope this has provided some insight in terms of how you're leading. So we have just a few minutes here. If you want to ask any questions, you can put them in chat. Any questions? Or comments? Glad to hear comments. In my desire to create a safe environment in my team, I tell them that I expect feedback, even if they disagree with me. Okay, going once, going twice. Okay, what do you mean by zero tolerance? Good question, thank you. Zero tolerance is executive committee that were demonstrating unacceptable behaviors such as backstabbing, unwillingness to accept feedback. They were fired. The zero tolerance, you can't stay. And as a matter of fact, it's a module that we teach in some of our leadership programs here, Who's on the Bus. And so what would you do with a manager that intentionally allows poor behavior? That's an interesting one. I tell you what I see is they unintentionally allow poor behavior because they don't know how to deal with it. And I tell you what we do is we provide coaching to that manager, and we intervene and we provide coaching directly to the employee. And again, we have what we call a corrective action form, and it's directed on behaviors, and people are told specifically what behaviors need to change. At IEEE, our performance appraisal system captures behaviors and accomplishments, and in the final rating, each one rates 50%. Behaviors are very important. Do you recommend weekly meetings with each team members? I do. I find that to be the most important thing with me and my manager, and me with my direct reports, keeping in touch. Why is CYA a negative thing? Cover your rear end? That's a really good question. If that's your function, if that's your modus operandi, you're not going to be honest about what's going on. And in fact, that's what was going on at Ford. A very good question. How to deal with micromanagement? Oh my gosh, these are very good questions. How to deal with micromanagement. That is one of the tougher issues that I deal with in my role. If someone is in a leadership role, we typically go to the outside for coaching. And the way we do it is we have the person's next level up manager, myself, and the coach meet, and we set goals for this person to reduce their focus on micromanagement. They then have a 6-month coaching agreement, and they need to demonstrate a change. Without spending all that kind of money, it's really incumbent on the next level up manager to coach and provide feedback. Micromanagement at its root is trust, right? I agree. Micromanagement is trust, but it is wanting things done my way. So to combat it would be to build trust between the employee and manager. That's part of it. That is part of it. I agree. But I've also seen micromanagement with people simply wanting it done a particular way. They feel that is the only way. So listen, there's more questions coming in. These are great questions. I thank you, and I tell you what, I'm more than happy to respond afterwards. If we want to throw my email up, I can respond to other questions beyond this, but I think we need to move on. So I'm going to turn this over to Jason at this point.
Okay, thank you, Ron. So in this section of the webinar, I'm going to talk about the value of feedback. So specifically, what is useful feedback? Some of the tools that are available. For example, we hear the words 360 feedback. So we'll go into that, and then afterwards we'll dive into some of the things that I've seen over the years as both a manager and a leader in my industry. So a couple of assumptions that we can generally make about leaders are that, and again, these are assumptions that tend to be things that as folks who are either exposed to leadership or who are leaders themselves, they see this often is that, there's an assumption that only a select few people are natural born leaders and that leadership cannot be learned. But based on extensive research, that's not the case. Leadership is a learned skill. Yes, there are those who are natural born leaders, but for the most part, just like anything else, leadership has to be learned. And some of the things we can say about great leaders is that leaders tend to ask for feedback and they're open to it. So whether it's constructive feedback from your team members or vice versa, you're giving feedback to others. That is one of the traits of good leadership. Great leaders are also learning continuously. So Ron kind of touched on that. So you have to be always willing to be in a learning mode. Great leaders also have, they gain broad experience, so they're not siloed into just one specific area. They also try to get out of their comfort zone. So again, being willing to take some risk, that is a thing that makes leadership so exciting. Being able to explore other areas that you may not feel that you have experience, but you're willing to take the challenge. And then obviously, like any leader or manager, having the ability to not only do active listening, but also ask good questions. So these are all the elements of the learning technical teams or leading technical teams program, and we'll go into it some more throughout this presentation. So let's first consider feedback and accepting feedback. So while it may be difficult to accept at times, receiving feedback is a gift. So we'll kind of go over some of the things that you see on the slide here. So why do people avoid feedback? Why do they reject feedback? What are some valuable types of feedback? And what do you do with it when you receive that feedback? So we'll start off with the first bullet. So why do people avoid feedback? So, those who get feedback, so it may be a team member of yours, sometimes they're fearful because, they're taking it personally and they feel like it's criticism. Or the fact that when you receive feedback, you feel like you're being rejected. Or they may point out, flaws or weaknesses that you don't want to hear about. So yeah, I mean, the fact that, feedback can be something that shows your vulnerability could potentially serve as a negative, which then that, some people don't want to hear about it. But in any organization that wants to succeed, feedback is critical for their performance. So having feedback is a necessary component for any type of group or team. So feedback should actually be one that is communicated in both directions. So not only should employees expect that feedback from their manager or direct supervisor, but the managers themselves should request feedback from their team members. So for example, in my case, I'm a senior manager of engineering, and I report directly to my director of engineering. And the way that I receive feedback from him is that I have a biweekly one-on-one where we kind of go over the things that I've been working on, and also receiving feedback as to perhaps ways that I can improve or things that I can do to help my team and my programs that I'm supporting. And vice versa, I'm also giving feedback to the engineers who are supporting some of the programs in my business, and I would also provide them, suggestions or things that they can actually help better their execution. So having feedback in both directions is advantageous. Lack of that upward feedback to your manager or to your direct supervisor should be a red flag, because then you're not receiving the communication that is necessary to better your organization. Positive feedback is equally important as development feedback, and it should be used to encourage, engage, and sustain great behavior. So we talked about behaviors when Ron went over his example. So again, we want to make sure that our team members are behaving appropriately in the workplace. Willingness to accept and use feedback is referenced in most high potential models. And again, the unwillingness to accept that feedback limits your ability to be promoted in the future. So again, we have to be able to receive feedback as well as give feedback. Again, our reaction to feedback provides our managers and direct supervisors with indications of how to conduct coaching. So again, in my situation where I am a manager and reporting to the director of engineering, when he hears my concerns and how I communicate my roles and responsibilities, he can take action and provide me the necessary coaching to better my ability to serve my business. So having that feedback is necessary. So I'm going to turn it over to Ron. He will go over this slide here.
Yeah, thanks. So our Leading Technical Teams program, which you're going to hear about in just a few minutes, uses the LPI 360, which is the model that I shared with you just a few minutes ago. And there is a direct correlation between this leadership model and success in a leadership role. There's been a lot of research conducted regarding why careers derail, which is the polite way of saying getting fired. So starting at the bottom, performance problems are the least frequent issue, believe it or not, which is not the case for individual contributors, but for people leaders, they've been promoted into the leadership role as a result of their strong performance. The majority of issues relate to the LPI model. So let's take a look at this. Back to the top, problems with interpersonal relationships. Okay, you're going to get feedback on that and model the way. You know, why do you need to listen to this survey? Well, if you're not hitting the ground on these issues, that leads to problems. So number one, as I mentioned, problems with interpersonal relationships. Number two, failure to build and lead a team. That's frequently associated with enabling others to act. As we mentioned, micromanagement is one of them, but there's many ways that you're not enabling others to act. A lack of self-awareness, unwillingness to accept feedback. That's across the entire survey, you know. Breach of trust is also a biggie, integrity issues. That goes back to model the way. And finally, inability to change or adapt. That's associated with challenge the process. So these are the most frequent reasons that people are terminated. And as you see, they're directly related to the model. Back to you, Jason.
Thank you, Ron. So what do we do with the feedback that we receive? So, you know, think about the feedback you receive yourself and what you did with it. And then also think about the feedback you gave. What did the other person do with it? So just to give an example from my own background. So many years ago, I was serving as a systems engineering manager on a aerospace program. And I had a team of engineers. Some of them actually were much older than me. And they were responsible as the responsible engineers on certain subsystems. And they would also be working with particular subcontractors to be able to develop and produce subsystems and parts for the system that we were building. So we were in a meeting with the supplier, and the responsible engineer who was supposed to be in this meeting was unavailable. He was not present at the meeting, and as a result, we had to proceed with certain decisions. And as the systems engineering manager, it was my job to finally make a decision so that the program can continue to move along. Well, that decision was made, and when the responsible engineer found out, he was not pleased. He actually was turned off by it, and he started to question my role as the manager, as the responsible leader for that program. So it actually trickled all the way up to my direct supervisor. And the comment that I got back from my direct supervisor was that, even though I did the right thing, the perception, the messaging that got back to the responsible engineer was that I was being arrogant, and I overstepped my boundary. So part of having feedback is that sometimes when you receive it, you have to think about how others perceive you, because sometimes, and this is a phrase that is probably common, is that perception is reality. When people see you and they perceive you in a certain way, the only way to counteract that is to have basically a discussion with them to make sure that they understand that you were not doing something unintentional. So the gist of the story is that I actually had a one-on-one discussion with this responsible engineer to clarify what I did, and that I was not doing it deliberately. And we did settle the issue. He understood that I was not being belligerent, and so we were able to move forward. But again, the moral of the story is that as a leader, receiving feedback is important, but also making sure that if there is something where your team members are not or misperceiving you in terms of what you've done, you need to make sure that you have conversations with that person. Okay, so again, as I mentioned, it's important for anyone that is either a leader to accept accountability. So again, accountability to your manager, as well as accountability to from your team. So making sure that how you as a leader can develop them successfully is critical. Okay, so we're at a point where we can take a few questions.
Yes, for anybody in the audience, if you have questions for Ron and Jason, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A box, and we'll start answering them as they come in. I have a question for Jason. How long did it take, or is it for you to become comfortable in your leadership role as you progress through your career?
Yeah. So as my bio was read at the beginning of the webinar, I've been in the aerospace and defense industry for close to 22 years now. I came out, out of graduate school and was an individual contributor for approximately 50% of those years. So really serving under managers and leaders and essentially doing, work, being guided by those people. And then afterwards, the opportunity came in during that halfway point where I was asked to step up because people saw in me the ability to actually lead others and to inspire others. But it took me some time to actually get used to it. I would say that it was probably maybe 3 or 4 years before I really felt comfortable. And part of that was the ability to actually see others and kind of emulate what they did and take that and groom it in the roles that I actually served in.
Thank you. There's a sort of broader question. I'll send this maybe out to Ron first, perhaps. My current manager was promoted by attrition and is a toxic leader and has spread that toxicity, I suppose, through the department. And I'm next in line for that position. How do I undo something that's already been done to create that environment?
That's a really good question. Undoing that environment will take some time. I think that there's a few things to think about. If we go back to the model, there's 2 areas to focus. Number one, setting the vision and being very intentional and communicate how the team is going to operate. You may want to, sketch out your bullet points on how you do want them to operate and communicate it. And then, the model the way, just respect for people. And now the thing that you may have to do if the behaviors are so integrated into the team functioning, you're going to have to call out people on your team. You're going to have coaching sessions with them. If you have an HR department, you're going to have to involve them. As I've already mentioned, a corrective action. We put people on corrective actions to tell them your behavior is unacceptable. It needs to change. We terminate people for unacceptable behavior. Not all organizations do, but if you want a culture, so again, a 2-step process. Clarify where you want to take the team and lead according to those principles. 2, look at the team in terms of who is not living up to standards and address them one-on-one. So that's my take on that.
Okay. Thank you, Ron. Jason, maybe you could field this one. What if your boss rejects your feedback? Should you stop providing it?
So, I mean, again, like in my situation where I have regular cadences of having one-on-ones with my director, I don't think that's an avoidable situation. But yeah, I mean, if your boss doesn't want to hear from you, then I think you should respect that. And then afterwards, perhaps there will be a situation in the future where that changes. But again, I find it that most people, whether it's your direct reports or to upper management, if they're really concerned about their teams as well as the performance of their business or organization, open communication and feedback is definitely something that should be welcomed.
Thank you. Another question, maybe Jason, for you. How do you handle a leadership role but still do the day-to-day technical duties? Or should a leader be focused only on leading without performing the actual technical activities?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I have never, even when going into leadership or managerial roles, the technical doesn't really go away. But as part of being a leader, part of my job is to be able to help others to actually do some of that technical work. And I serve as almost as oversight or as a consultant or as a coach. So you're not really putting the technical background behind you because you actually are still serving as the actual authority. But you're having those perhaps more junior engineers or other members of the team that are really taking the initiative to do that work, and you're actually helping them to actually perform, because then afterwards they can feel a sense of pride when they've accomplished their goals by doing the work.
Nice, thank you. We have one more question I think we have time for. Maybe Ron, we can direct this one towards you. Typically, critical feedback is not received well. How can this be structured so it is received in the proper context?
It's a very situational question, because I think I can think of a variety of situations that come to mind in this scenario. I mean, the generic response is the sandwich of a positive, a negative, and a positive. In some cases, the negative is so negative that you don't really want to use that method. And I think, but most important, I think in all cases, you deliver all negative feedback along the terms of you care about them as a person, you want to see them succeed, and you are there behind them to support them, and we need to talk about this one issue. So I think it's the sense of support that needs to be delivered in addition to the negative feedback.
Nice, thank you. That ends our queue. You can continue to put questions in the Q&A box if you'd like. I am going to move forward, if you don't mind, and just talk a little bit about our Leading Technical Teams program. As I noted when we began this session and discussion that you have been participating in today is a preview into a larger program that we have called IEEE Leading Technical Teams. This program includes two very important components. One is that 360 leadership practices inventory that you've been hearing about. This is a great opportunity for people to gather feedback on their strengths, their own strengths, their areas for improvement, and get very detailed feedback from their peers and management. And it also contains an important self-assessment component as well. This LPI activity begins 30 days in advance of live sessions that we're holding. So the second component to this Leading Technical Teams is a live 6-hour session where participants receive the results from their LPI. They get a very personalized analysis and report of their results, and then they participate during that day in group discussions. They receive and give peer coaching, and then participate in instructor-led exercises specific to the LPI. Hold on 1 second. The session focuses a lot on the foundational parts of the program, which are the 5 practices for exemplary leadership, which are foundational to the program that Ron and Jason have detailed today. Another important component is that we have included IEEE case studies. These were developed in collaboration with some of our IEEE members, and they're designed to prompt thought and discussion around real life scenarios that technical leaders face every day. Some of the benefits of the program: it is specifically designed for technical leaders. It is a great way to, once again, gather important feedback from your peers, from your managers, and learn ways to foster accountability in yourself and for team members. And can really provide an excellent support system for meeting other people and gathering some peer coaching. It's a cost-effective and easy way to gain this type of training. It's available for companies. If your company is interested in participating and having multiple people participate, we can hold this on site at the company location. We're also setting up sort of centralized sites and dates where people, if you're an individual and would like to come, we'd love to have you. And once again, this allows people to get immediate and personalized feedback that they can begin using right away. And I just want to highlight before we go, we do have an upcoming session for individuals who might be interested and located on the East Coast of the U.S. We've got a session coming up in New York City at the IEEE's headquarters on Thursday, the 12th of October. And we have a registration deadline of this upcoming Monday, September 18th. If you recall, part of the details of the program are 30 days in advance, we start that LPI survey process. So the deadline is coming up on Monday for the New York session. And then we've got another one taking place in November, on November 9th, out in San Jose, California. And if anybody is interested in more information, all of that can be found in the resources folder on the platform today. So I would like to thank Ron and Jason very much for the excellent discussion, and all of you took time out of your busy schedules to join us today. We really do appreciate it. And I thank you very much, and get in contact with us if you have any questions, and have a great day. We've come to the end of the session.